All right, good morning, everyone. And for those who are joining us for the first time today, I'm Patrick Amos, president of the Independent Telecommunications Pioneer Association, National Capital Chapter. Today, we're thrilled to have you with us today as part of ITPA's ongoing and popular series of information exchange sessions, from in-person luncheons to now remote, although we do plan to return to in-person sessions for the following months. We are here today to discuss our monthly series in the art of trusting no one. It's a webinar that will feature a keynote on zero trust networking with our guest today, Mr. Gerald Caron III, Chief Information Officer of the Office of the Inspector General, United States Health and Human Services, with 2021 more important than ever, especially for our federal government agencies, due to the increase in cyber attacks. Due to the recent events transpired throughout the world last week, CISA and other security agencies released a joint statement with guidance from all agencies and personnel to be on high alert, and there are more cyber bad actors now than ever. Our guest, Mr. Caron, is an expert in the field who is actively engaged in supporting a zero trust virtual landscape, and we are honored to have him with us today. But first, a little bit about ITPA. The Independent Telecommunications Pioneer Association is a nonprofit organization of professionals created by and for the telecommunications industry. Dedicated to community service, ITPA has been serving the public on behalf of telecom companies since 1920. ITPA represents more than 9,000 telecommunication employees, retirees, and industry affiliates. As we emerge from the pandemic and over a year of quarantine, it is time to start planning physical activities. The availability of COVID-19 vaccines, state of local restrictions will allow us to continue our trek in this new normal. Yearly, ITPA brings telecommunication professionals from all over the United States together and assemble them. But because of COVID-19, the 2020 and 2021 assemblies were canceled. The ITPA National Assembly is a time where ITPA chapters and clubs share the community service projects, honor those who have contributed to the industry during our Hall of Fame and luncheon, and celebrate the preservation of telephony and going forward in telecommunications. ITPA recently celebrated its 100th birthday, and we move forward, and we need continued valuable traditions from the past. The good news is the ITPA Board of Directors has elected to resume the in-person event known as the Annual Assembly, which is scheduled for April 2022. The Crown Plaza is ready to take your reservations, so contact them at 1-833-681-4979 and mention the code MKL to get reduced rates. These ITPA exclusive rates will be good for 3 days prior to and 3 days after assembly. The Crown Plaza offers free parking and free shuttle to metro stations. The Greenbelt Metro Station is what's closest by, which is conveniently located within 3 blocks of the hotel. Please go ahead and make your reservations at the hotel while we have availability. Now, the charities that we support. First, an update to our initial in-person Capital Area Food Bank volunteer opportunity. The Capital Area Food Bank is moving to an all-delivery distribution model, and there will no longer be pickups at either of the DC or Lorton facilities. While the Capital Area Food Bank pivots, they'll continue hosting pop-up pantries where we understand there to be more need for partners to reach and supply can accommodate at the time. We are actively looking to reschedule and will have new dates shortly. JDRF, the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, is glad President Biden used the State of the Union this week to address insulin affordability crisis, which has had devastating consequences in the diabetes community for far too long. Joshua Davis, the young man with type 1 diabetes who joined the First Lady in the gallery, was one of the JDRF Children's Congress delegates who called for action on this issue in 2017. It is long past time for Congress to act on a bipartisan basis to make this life-saving drug affordable to all. ITPA NCC is proud to support our local JDRF chapter. As the conflict overseas very publicly takes center stage, our president recently announced that the United States would deploy 7,000 additional soldiers to Europe to help lend those during their time of need. For those service members deployed to conflict zones, the USO is always ready to provide support and a home away from home, no matter where their services take them. Nothing speaks louder about the commitment to your USO and the trust the military has in us than the presence alongside these forward deployed troops now in the wake of recent events. Thanks to the generosity of our sponsors, we are proud to help the USO be able to be by the sides of our troops and service members and on their way to deployment, both here in home and in Europe, every step of the way. Having this constant support through every stage of the deployment journey can be incredibly comforting to service members and their families during otherwise stressful times. In keeping with the spirit of supporting our servicemen and women that have served our country, we hope that you will join us for our 14th annual charity golf tournament in October, where we'll have representatives from the local charities on hand and a team of SGMA and associations that help empower wounded veterans on airway at a time. One airway at a time, excuse me. So we'll talk a little bit more about the events after the presentation, but we'll also talk more about the organization. And of course, with us, we would be possible without the support of it wouldn't be possible without the support of our sponsors. So on behalf of the ITPA NCC, I would like to thank our platinum sponsors, Avaya Government Solutions, Comcast Government Services, Granite Government Solutions, Hughes Government and Defense Solutions, Lumen Technologies, and CommScope. Our gold sponsors, BT Federal, Crown Castle, Mettel, Sus Consulting, and Verizon. Our silver sponsors, Equinix, GES, Turning Point, and Pathway Partners, and Zscaler. And our technology sponsor, Panoptis Intelligence. Today, I'm proud to highlight our newest sponsors, CRT International and AM Fadita Consulting. We're thrilled to welcome back John Crawley and have Amy as seasoned sponsors. And she has been an avid supporter and advocate for ITPA for many years. I'm proud to announce that we have struck a new relationship with G2 Exchange, a Mile 10 company who have added our upcoming events to their website calendar and will help get the word out about all of our future events and news moving forward. Thank you all. And now, before we begin, a quick item before we get started. Number one, relationship to our press policy. We welcome our friends and colleagues from the media. As a reminder, today's sessions are all on the record. Number two, questions. You may submit all of your questions and our moderator will try to get through them as many as possible. Point number three, any technical challenges. If you're having any technical difficulties, use the chat box in the toolbar to chat with the website host. And number four, on demand. Today's webinar recording will be available for your viewing on the ITPA NCC YouTube channel. And if you would like a copy of the slide deck as well, reach out to us at itpancc@gmail.com. And now I'm pleased to introduce one of our board members, our industry chair of the year speaker committee, and personal friend, Ms. Donna Miller. Donna has worked in the telecommunications and information technology industry for 20 years, gaining experience in collaboration technologies, cybersecurity, cloud edge technologies, and customer experience. As a seasoned business development professional and senior director at Lumen Technologies Public Sector, she is passionate about helping large federal enterprise agencies find answers to their problems, effectively working effectively to develop solutions. So now it is my honor to welcome Donna. Over to you. We can't hear you, Donna. Your line is muted.
There we go. Thanks, Pat. I'm very pleased to be here with everyone today, and especially happy to continue supporting ITPA as a volunteer board member. And certainly want to thank everyone on the board involved in making today's The Art of Trusting No One webinar happen. As you can imagine, there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes. Now I'd like to say a few more words about our keynote speaker. Mr. Gerald Caron III is a member of the Senior Executive Service and is Chief Information Officer, Assistant Inspector General of Information Technology at the Department of Health and Human Services. Mr. Caron is also a co-chair on the CIO's Innovation Council for ZeroTrust, as well as co-chair for ATARC's ZeroTrust Working Group. It is truly an honor to have him here with us today, sharing his deep understanding of this topic. Jerry has over 24 years of information technology experience. He began his career in the Army, working on hands-on technical positions, serving for 7 years as a programmer and administrator. He then spent 2 years as a contractor with the federal government, which, as we know, brings its own understanding, and he has acquired more refined technical skills and a more detailed understanding of IT operations. He joined the federal government at the Department of State in 2003 as a system administrator, and he held multiple positions at State, moving from managing small technical groups, leading up to serving as the Director of Enterprise Network Management within Information Resource Management. One of his most significant accomplishments was acting as the technical liaison during a major cybersecurity event at the department. His leadership allowed the department to resolve the incident as quickly and effectively as possible with minimal impact to the mission. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Caron. Thanks for joining us, Jerry.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here, and I really appreciate you letting me talk to the group today. And very passionate subject for me.
Yes, obviously. So let's get started. But as Pat mentioned, a quick reminder, we have the Q&A available, and you can insert your question into the Q&A box. We'll see how many we can get to. And any unanswered questions will be answered and transmitted after the webinar. So Jerry, you have our attention.
Thanks, Donna. In talking about this subject with Donna in preparation for speaking with you all, usually I give what I call ZeroTrust 101. I still find that there's much of an education needed, even with other government. I've talked with other government CIOs, and they say, I hear ZeroTrust is they'll define ZeroTrust, and I'm like, oh no, this is not right, kind of thing. But I was going to take a little different. So you get kind of like where my concepts are in ZeroTrust. So you'll get some of that 101. But we're really gearing this presentation is a presentation that I actually use to talk to my users and how to relay ZeroTrust to them and why it's important to them. Why? Because they're part of the team, or I'm drafting them as part of the team. Why? Because, well, first of all, IT is not the main mission of HHS OIG, for instance. We're an enabler of the mission. If it wasn't for the mission of the OIG here, IT would not be here. We would not have an IT group. So I really need to understand how they work and we'll talk about some of the benefits, which I'll get to here in a bit. So we can go to the next slide. So some of these slides I'll go through really quick. because I don't think there's too much of an education. So we can go to the next slide as well. So the purpose is to talk to the user base about what zero trust is in the simplest as terms possible, right? Because they're going to be hearing this term and things are going to change for them. So they're going to be like, well, why did that change? Or why is this being done? Well, first of all, it's an executive order. We have memos from OMB. Does the users really care about that? No, they don't care about mandates. They just want to get their jobs done. But we need to let them know we are doing this, but at the end of the day, it's to benefit you so that you can access the right data at the right time, and it has the integrity that you can trust to make the decisions that you need to make off it. It hasn't been tampered with. So really what it focuses on and things like that. You could go to the next slide. So basically we talk to them about, something that we can relate to. Traditionally we do security in the castle and moat, where, you have the nice perimeter security, the moat and the walls, and you have some of these silos, you have different rooms where you, possibly VLAN things off if you're talking from a network term, things like that. Whereas zero trust is a more holistic security. It's layered, it's integrated, it's an architecture, it's not a tool, it's not a product, it's an architecture, it's an integration effort, it's a framework. You can relate it to all of those three kind of things. So it's not about building higher walls, it's designed about building better gates. And why? Because what are we trying to do at the end of the day? Protect data. So really concentrate on protecting data, and those better gates are the right data to the right access, the right data to the right people with the right access at the right time. Is kind of what we keep stressing throughout this presentation. So we'll go to the next slide and talk about what zero trust actually, well, in traditional security, if you've seen the old commercial, the little boy with his Tootsie Roll Pop keeps going to everybody, and then finally Mr. Turtle says, how many licks does it take to get to the Tootsie Roll Pop, the center of a Tootsie Roll Pop? And Mr. Turtle tells him to go see Mr. Owl. So we all know Mr. Owl takes the Tootsie Roll Pop and he goes 1, 2, 3, and the third is a bite. So if you think of him as a malicious actor, he has used his tool to get straight to the center. Whereas rather than to keep licking it and licking it and licking it, he got to the soft gooey center after 2 licks and a bite. So basically, when we do zero trust security, it assumes all users and devices pose a threat. I don't, people talk about insider threat, outsider threat. Everybody poses a threat. Even that non-malicious person, they circumvent the security just because they got to get a darn job done. Well, if that person just trying to get their mission done, not trying to be malicious or intentionally circumvent security, they're just trying to get a job done. Can't the bad guys leverage that as well? So we have to make sure that we pose, all users pose a threat. If you're an X-File fan, basically you trust no one, right? And we assume breach as well. So the main thing we do with zero trust is never trust, but always verify. And we can go to the next slide. So one of the analogies I like to use, you'll see a few analogies coming up here, is the airport. So in the daily lives of airport security, we travel to another country, we need to buy a ticket. That's our user access request. You check in, that's your identification, your contextual information collection. You go to the immigration border, they authenticate that you are who you are when checking them. And before onboarding, you get authorization and conditional access. What seat do you sit in? You go in the right destination, you're at the right gate, and then you're on the plane and off to where you're going. So that's kind of the steps we're taking with zero trust. We want to make sure right people, the right access to the right data at the right time. We can go to the next slide, and we're going to use another analogy. So I go to the movie theater today. I go to the multiplex movie theater, and where do they take my ticket? They scan my ticket in the lobby. I now have access to the whole movie theater because I can walk into basically any movie. Why? There's no ticket takers at the door. So I can actually spend my whole day at the movies and go hop from one movie to another. No one's going to know the difference in a lot of times. So there's just basically nobody validating. Now, everybody, once they're allowed into the movie theater, has access to, the restrooms, the lobby, the concessions and things like that. But you really bought a ticket for a movie. However, let's say I bought a ticket for the regular showing, but hey, the IMAX shows in about 5 minutes. Hey, I would rather see it in IMAX. So today, the movie theater I go to currently, most frequently when I do go to the movies, when we were regularly going to the movies, they show you my ticket in the lobby and I could walk into any theater basically. Go to the next slide. So that's today. That's the traditional type of security basically. You're over the moat, you're over the walls, and you're in that soft gooey center of the Tootsie Roll Pop and move your way around. Now with Zero Trust, that is where we're changing it different. We have several checkpoints. Yes, am I allowed into the movie theater? Okay, all right, since you're allowed in the movie theater, you just about everybody has access to the concessions. However, I am getting checked at the movie theater door now, and I have a specific seat that I need to be sitting in. So I'm having my ticket checked at the door. I'm making sure that I am put into the right seat. And then also it's an ongoing authentication and an ongoing access. The usher, we used to have ushers in the old days. You don't see them as much anymore, but they kept checking. Is the lights down? Is the theater the theater lights down? Is the movie projector working? Is the screen down? Is the movie showing? Are the exit lights lit? Is everybody in the right seats? And is everybody that's supposed to be in there in there? So that's where we're doing, but basically that's how Zero Trust is going to work, right? Ongoing authentication, ongoing access to consume that data, which is the data, which is the movie. Now, let's say, using the past example, I wanted to go to the IMAX movie. Well, okay, I have to do, I bought a regular ticket. I got to go back to the ticket booth now, get a new ticket to upgrade, or maybe we can equate that to a step-up authentication. And now I go back to the IMAX theater. There's somebody to take my ticket, make sure that I get in the right seat, and does all that checking again and constantly checks. Why do we do the constant checks? Because factors change, right? And then if in the technical aspects, if we reach certain thresholds, we need to take an action based on what my risk tolerance is. So my risk tolerances meets a certain threshold, a factor has changed. Like, let's say the movie projector broke, I need to take an action. So in IT terms, if I reach a certain threshold because of some factors that put me over that risk threshold, I may downgrade you to read only. You no longer can download or print. Kind of an example. So that's kind of what we're equating to. So trying to use analogies that users can relate to. We can go to the next slide. Everybody knows Frederick the Great. He's a great IT innovator of his time, and he who defends everything defends nothing. And if you go to the next slide, why I say this, in Jerry's opinion, the way we have done security historically in the federal government, to me, is we have done the peanut butter spread approach. Apply it evenly everywhere. Everything's important. Everything needs to be 100% patch. Well, Donna talked about, my time at the Department of State. I was responsible for the patch management program, 109,000 desktops in geographic locations where you have low bandwidth, high latency, and you're pushing gigs of patches to them. Do you think that I was 100% all the time? Probably not, right? That's the tough thing to do in a size of a agency that size, to be 100% all the time, and make sure everything's configured 100% all the time. It's a daunting task to be 100% of everything, but we did the peanut butter spread approach. And this is where I also get on my high horse, is we're very compliance focused, right? I like to use the example, NIST 800-53 will say system must provide authentication. All right, authentication is username and password. I have provided authentication. Well, that's compliant, but it's not effective. And I think we were pushed as a federal government. We kind of got compliance focused, but that doesn't mean that we're being effective at our cybersecurity. So that's the way I think historically we've kind of done IT, in my opinion. Of course, you go to the next slide. So objectives to business Zero Trust, and remember, this is education for the users and how we can talk to the users. If we talk IT to IT folks all the time, we get really technical, but this is not just an IT thing. We need to talk to the users, and we need to get their buy-in, which we'll kind of talk about what's the payoff for them at the end of this. But we want to be more people-centric than technology-centric. Zero Trust is an element of overall digital transformation. Of course, I want to change our mindset. It's a culture change in how we do cybersecurity. Assume breach, never trust. That castle and moat concept has got to go. There's a different way to do things and be more effective. in protecting our data. We want to and the right data. You know, the cafeteria schedule is not the same as your medical records. You know, we want to make sure that your medical records are protected. If the cafeteria schedule gets compromised, okay, but I'm a little concerned with how they got it. But can I still answer the question that the medical record, your medical records are safe? Yes, I can. So that's good. So because I have a different level and different controls around that, and I'm making sure I'm building, you know, more granular controls closer to the pockets of data that I have, because all data is not created equal. Continuous authentication authorization. I talked about that. We want to be tailored to our infrastructure. There is no one size fits all for any of our government agencies. Everybody knows that. We're at different places in maturity. We have different budgets and things like that. So it's not going to look the same here as it's going to look in someplace else probably. And right data, the right people at the right time. We increase secure data availability. Is the very big point. Of course, we're talking to the users during this presentation, so we keep stressing that point. You can go to the next slide. So trust no one. Like I said, fan of the X-Files, trust no one, know your people, know your devices. Why? Because you got to know what your people are doing, what data they need access to, how they work or how they want to work as you're going on the journey. Learn how they work. What are those personas? What data do they rely on to do their jobs? What applications, devices do they use to access said data? Because they might do it in different ways. You know, a mobile device is not going to be different than a laptop, or a BYOD device is going to be different than a fully managed device. So there's different levels of risk to all those. So got to understand that, how they want to work, not just how they work, but how they want to work. But what data do they need access to? Once you understand that, what is that data? What's the classification of that data as well? Design systems, assuming they're compromised, of course, just trust everything. So when a breach happens, you're protected as could be, just like I talked about the medical records versus the cafeteria schedule. Use dynamic access controls. Access to services must be authenticated, authorized, always encrypted, and can be revoked during a session because factors change, like I said, just like in the movie theater example. Constantly evaluate risk. So when you read 800-207, NIST 800-207, it talks about a policy engine. Policy engine is a very technical term for a thing that if this happens, then do this. But there's a methodology and a concept, and I call it dynamic risk scoring is what I call it, that you need to apply, that the policy engine adheres to and takes the action on. So like I said, there's going to be different factors coming in that you're going to have different integrations. There's factors that change, and if thresholds are met, then the policy engine takes that action. So you want to constantly do an evaluation due to those factors that may change, that may put you over a threshold that requires action. And defense is based on classification data. We're trying to protect data. Our users, and when we're talking to them in this, you rely on data to make decisions, and you need to make sure that its integrity is there, that you can trust it, and that you can access it when you need it, or when you're supposed to need it. We need to be judicious about it. You can go to the next slide. So there we talk about the steps at a very high level. It's a journey. It's going to be multi-years. You know, there's no one size fits all. It's not taking something off the shelf, switching it on, and we're done. I wish it was that easy, but of course, nothing is ever that easy. So basically, we're telling the users we need them to be on this journey with us. I like to equate our users as I use a football analogy, right? When I'm doing a playbook. All right, who are the players that I need on the field? Right? And there's a quarterback, who's my quarterback, who's all those players that I need on the field, the people that are getting this done, that are doing this implementation. Then on the sideline, I have the coaches, I have the coaching staff, which is your PMO, your project managers, all the people that kind of support that as well, you know, the water boys, things like that, the trainers. And then I have my executive suite. Need to prioritize this for the agency. So the agency head, the CIO, the CFO is getting money. Make sure that everybody, the team has what they need to be successful, right? That's what your executive staff is doing, and prioritizing, you know, what needs to be done. And then you have the fans. This is what this presentation is talking to the fans. And the fans are the ones that I get the satisfaction from this, the ones that you're there for in the first place. You know, they're the ones that you're entertaining. They're the ones that they came to see you or use your products to get their job done. So we want to get the buy-in of the fans, because that's going to help decide how you go forward in some of this, and some of the feedback that you're getting that we're going to talk about a little bit more. But that's what we're trying to get across to them. So we're starting to buy them in here. You go to the next slide. So one of the things I did is, some people will ask, like, where did you start? So just, and for the users, there's a lot of work to be done. This is my functional capabilities model. As a user, okay, some of you, the technical, of course, this group, you know what some of this stuff is, but for users, my message is, there's a lot of work to be done. We're accounting for all of these. I'm doing an inventory of my current investments. What do I have covered, or what can I cover, even if I'm not using it? And if you go to the next slide, then, and this is not a reflection, this is just an example. So, but what is our maturity? We're doing good at data loss prevention. We got a little work to work in data classification. Metadata management, yeah, we're either not doing it, or we gotta do better at it, kind of thing. So, color code, of course, would be a spreadsheet, which we actually have, that kind of scopes some of this stuff and gives details on some of these things. But this is kind of a self inventory, to reflect. And like I said, this is an example of what one could look like, but kind of like inventory of, what could I do today, or what am I doing today? What's the art of the possible with my current investment before I start going buying a bunch of tools? I want to make the most of my investment if I can. So you can go to the next slide. So just displays to the user, a lot of work to be done. And how we're gonna move through what it kind of looks like. We do traditional, like we said, castle and moat, everything within the circle. Hey, we trust all that. That's great. With macro and micro segmentation, okay, we kind of segmented it a bit, but with zero trust, we're kind of the identity, we're separating it all. And we're segmented it even further, and it's trust no one. And you can see the circles are a little closer in, meaning that we're moving our protections in a little closer. Next slide. And so, network environment, we're going to protect network. Protecting networks with zero trust can be used to protect secure access within and between network zones, assumes all users and access requests are suspect, of course. We need to proof you, and, depending on, how you're authenticating, what kind of device you're using, do I have telemetry of that device, what type of user you are, those are factors, and that's going to determine the risk. What am I going to let you do? What am I going to let you access, basically? So we're doing an assessment of that. So you could be the same user and on a fully managed laptop, for instance, but if you're trying to access your email and download it and copy it and save it, but if you are a BYOD user and we're doing managed application access, well, there's a little more risk to that. Doing it on your personal device, I'm still going to let you read your email, but I'm probably not going to let you download or print, things like that. You can go to the next slide. So then we talk about, we kind of talk about my architecture. We talk about things about what we're doing with the data, and kind of baselining the data, because, I need to know what I'm protecting, what that is, where it is, and where it's going. So baselining that. You can go to the next slide. We're going to go through these ones pretty quick. Talk about endpoints and devices. Do I have telemetry or not? The state of a device in the zero trust, of course, is a little more important, because kind of we don't do that otherwise. Segmenting, we're talking about differently. We're not just talking about VLANs, but we're talking about getting to the granularity of segmenting the system itself and within the database, because there's different, all data is not created equal, still in the same database as well. You can go to the next slide. This is kind of the 101 that I think probably this group doesn't know. I talked a little bit about the different levels of risk, which you'll see down here in the corner. There are different ways to authenticate a user, and those all have a different level of risk. Can be the same user, actually, and then that's going to determine what access they have to what data and things like that based off those factors from many different ways. And we're going to constantly evaluate that, which on the next slide, we'll kind of see, of course, a lot of monitoring at any time, because I have to weigh a lot of factors. So I need a lot of telemetry to make real-time decisions. You can go to the next slide, where we talk about ongoing authentication, ongoing access, and ongoing evaluation. Just like the user and the credentials that they're using, we also do that with the device as well, and the application that they are using to facilitate access to the data between the user and what that data has access to. We can go to the next slide. And so then we start talking about the benefits to my organization and the user community. Improves overall security posture. I think that's a no-brainer. Increased protection, both internal and external threats. So it doesn't matter, it's zero trust. We talk about insider threats. I'm treating everybody as an outsider, basically. There are no insiders anymore. Everybody's outside until I allow them in. Limit the possibility of data exfiltration because I'm segmenting and putting my protections around the different data. Reduces attackers' ability to move laterally. Of course, increases visibility to all the users. Reduces the threat surface, most definitely, because I'm doing more segmentation at different areas within the OSI model. Improve your end user. So benefits to the end users, we're going to improve their experience. How are we going to do that? Talk about that in a second. Streamlines the user access. Improves security as a remote worker, improves your data protection, right data to the right people at the right time, and it has the integrity. You can trust that data hasn't been tampered with and that you can make decisions off it. So definitely benefits like I talked about. I'm not going to read all these off, but like when we talked about benefits to the end user, right now we kind of do this concept of what I call the boomerang or tethering. So basically, we have a tick mandate in the federal government. We have to go through a trusted internet connection. Well, those trusted internet connections are usually in a data center. And so what do? We VPN them back to a data center to go out through a tick just to go back out to the cloud. Well, kind of inconvenient routing, if you ask me. So we're looking at solutions and ideas so I can send them more direct, but I can still get the security benefits as the IT and make it more efficient for them to go more direct to the cloud while I'm still getting my security telemetry and be a more better experience for them. Single sign-on, data interoperability as we go through clouds and we're using more data warehouses, data lakes. And now they're talking about lake houses, which is a new term that I just learned. There's all kinds of different terms for all these pools of data. But we want to make sure data's interoperability, so single sign-on, things like that. Doing things like BYOD I think is definitely possible. Historically, I think what we've done in my previous experiences has been, okay, well, this network over here, we can't do this. So let's create another network so we can do that, because we relied on the network to be the security boundary and enforce the security. And so then we have all these bifurcated networks, and that makes things more complicated. So I think in zero trust, and the true concept of zero trust, you can bring those and stop that bifurcation because of the way you're doing it. I'm an inside out guy. I start with data, work my way back. What facilitates access to the data? Or how do I protect the data? What are the concepts around that? And then what facilitates access to the data? It's not the device, it's actually the application, whether that be a web browser or an application. So what can we do around the application? Okay, what are the concepts there? Applications sit on devices. Okay, what are the concepts we do with devices? There's fully managed devices. There's BYOD devices. Okay, there's some telemetry I can get from a BYOD, like what model it is. We know there's some models we don't want on a federal government network. Things like that. Are they at the latest iOS version, or are they 2 versions behind? I might not want to let them in at all until they personally bring their BYOD device up to specs. If it's a fully managed device, I have all kinds of telemetry, so my risk is a little bit lower. They're coming from my on-premise network where I have a lot of telemetry, which is a lower risk than coming from the coffee shop with the Wi-Fi down the street. And they're using a PIV card, which is probably much lower risk than using a username and password. So those factors all add up to my decisions of what they're able to access. So definitely trying to get them to understand, they'll be able to do this if they're using this. They'll be able to access this, but they won't be able to do the full access or download or print that they would normally do under these conditions, things like that. But definitely, as you saw in M2209, if you've read that, eliminating passwords or the need to keep resetting passwords because it's just so ineffective. People write them down because they're switching them every 60 days and they got to be so complex. It's like, how am I going to ever remember that? So there's a lot of good things, I think, that comes to the user. So definitely, I think what I'm talking about, you got a little bit of the 101 and my concepts and my thoughts around what zero trust is and how I'm addressing it, but also how the users are important and how trying to have this conversation with them early. Like I've already given our user group this presentation, because now what am I going to do? I'm going to start surveying them and creating those personas. How do they work? How do they want to work? So I can build those requirements in. Why? Because if I understand those things and the data that they need, then if I'm building that in, it's going to be much easier to sell this and implement this and get them to not, push back and things like that, and, start complaining, because, politics sometimes can outweigh doing the right thing. And next thing you know, my zero trust effort is gone. So that the end users being part of the team is very important. You go to the next slide. So we talk about it's being a journey. How do we get there? Talked about a lot of this already. You can go to the next slide. Our strategic plan. I have a strategic plan. I got a one pager for our users. We got 5 goals. It's a multi-year plan, and this is specifically our strategic goal number 2 in our strategic plan. So we're letting the users know this is what we're doing for you. The CIO's office here within OIG has a strategic plan, and this is part of our strategic plan to make them aware of that. You can go to the next slide. And so, like I said, zero trust is a journey, asking them, what data do you own? What data needs to be protected? So these are all the questions that we're going to start asking them and getting engaged with them to get their feedback, so we can start incorporating this, understanding the personas, understanding where, as we inventory this data, did we get it all? So by checking with the users, we can kind of validate that as well. What are their work behaviors? What works well, what doesn't? So we can incorporate that. We want to build that in, because this will be much easier to adopt and for them to accept if we're including them up front. So that's kind of the purpose of what we were doing here. You can go to the next slide. I think we're at the end. Yep, this is just a little video that we gave them. That's what this was on this slide, to kind of give them another perspective of what it is. And go to the next slide, and I think that's it. Hopefully I'm under time or at time. Kind of breeze through it.
That was great, Jerry. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. I'm checking to see if there are any questions. I don't see any yet, but I do have a question for you.
Sure.
And that is, how have your audience that you've given this presentation, your users, how has it been received?
Well, got good feedback. It's a hard subject to try to, you can get a little technical. So trying to get it, so you got various people right now. You got some people that aren't technical savvy. You got some that are. So we're trying to give enough information to hit all of those, because some people are a little more interested in some of the technical, even though they're end users. But all in all, is great feedback. Why? Because we're talking to them. Historically, the IT shop is in their dark corner in their Frankenstein lab, and all of a sudden they come out and we're doing this, and it's like, wait, that's gonna screw this up, or you can't do that because of the blah blah blah. We're talking to them, so they're very thankful that we're engaging early. And do they understand zero trust completely? Not necessarily, but they know something's coming. They know that we're going to be engaging. They know that we're going to be doing some things over the coming years that is going to change the way they work potentially. So we're giving them a heads up, and they're very appreciative of that. They're very appreciative that we're open to, if you have any questions or if you have any feedback or any ideas, let us know. We want to incorporate. We want to hear from you. You're part of the team. We're here because of you. That's the message I keep sending our user base. That I think it's been a little shaky when I first got here. But I think the more I'm doing a lot of focus on communications. So there's going to be a big, even more of a marketing campaign. This was the first shot at letting them know something's coming. But very good feedback, I think, that we have. And it gives a lot more trust in the IT shop as well, that, hey, they know what they're talking about. Here's our CIO actually talking to us. Seems very knowledgeable about this, has a plan. of how he's approaching this. So it gives a level of comfort too, I think, that helped with getting the positive feedback we did.
Well, improving the user experience will always go a long way. So I loved your analogy about the passwords, and I might be guilty of writing mine down somewhere.
Yeah, I see it on your.
So we do have some questions that have popped up.
Sure.
One question is, how have new technologies such as tokens help with identity management?
So that's a great thing about M22-09, and I think even DISA, I heard General Skinner talking. I went to the first conference in person in Baltimore a few months ago, which was a weird feeling to be at a conference in person. But he was talking about, the PIV card and, the end of the PIV card. What's next after the PIV card? They've served us well, but they've kind of gone past. There's other technologies, and and if you read M22-09 that I mentioned, it talks about phishing resistant MFA and authentication. So that's something that I think I just got out of my working group, my ATARC working group, that we got to dive a little bit into. There's a few vendors, I guess, that do it. I haven't looked into it deeply. It's not a whole bunch of detail in M22-09 of what the requirements specifically are, but something that I got to look into a little more. But definitely there's other options than doing the PIV card that are out there that are acceptable, depending on the level of authentication that you actually need. So definitely something that we're looking in my working group at ATARC. At ATARC, we have 54 vendors participating, and they present once a week. All 54 are getting 75 minutes, and we're going through all 54 vendors. Once we have every Friday at 11, they present, and we have 1 or 2 vendors every Friday. And the next thing we're going to do is do integration present demos. We're going to ask them to set up integrated demos because, like I said, no one tool does it all. They're doing their siloed presentations, and we're going to ask them to build labs of integrations and partner and do integration labs next. So looking at a lot of technologies. I know there's a question on technologies. I can't advocate for any technology. I can talk to you offline about some of the ones I'm looking at. But being this kind of forum, I can't advocate or promote any specific ones. I do have some that I'm interested in. I'm talking with people all the time, looking for the art of the possible. That ongoing authentication, ongoing access, I haven't quite seen it yet. A singular policy engine, I've seen an integrated lab, but the policy engine aspect is in like different places. There's not one like as clean as the 800-207 that you see, that diagram. So still looking for a lot of things. I'm doing a lot of assessment of what I can do with what I got. And there may be like, I don't really think that's the best product to do this with. So need to get something else and understand my gaps. So.
Very good. Well, your mentioning of the integration demos has piqued some interest. Someone has asked, how can I get more information on the integration demos?
Yeah, so primarily that's with our working group with atarc.org. If you're interested, if you're industry partner, I think there is a fee to participate. But the good thing about what I like about working with ATARC, of course, if you work directly with a government person, if you're a vendor or services provider, there's a acquisition red tape that we have to go through just to do a free proof of concepts. Even with ATARC, it lets us government and vendors work with under that nonprofit umbrella and get some progress. And there's a lot of good collaboration. It's Chatham House rules in there. Everybody's created equal, and we make it actionable. So one of the things we did as the government is at the beginning of the working group, we had government and vendors separate for a little bit because we found out government had the level set on what's zero trust and all right, what is this concept? What is this concept? And kind of defining that. And then as we got output from the government, we fed it to the vendor so they could start thinking about that. And then we developed. Then ultimately we brought them back together as one group, and then we started developing use cases and we presented them with an outline and we said, all right, you're going to present, here's like the one pager I gave you. What do you cover? What functional areas do you cover? What does your product do? What's the architecture look like if I deploy it? Here's 5 use cases, which we used our TIC 3.0 use cases, kind of, a headquarters, a branch office with low latency, high bandwidth, a non-VPN, BYOD situation kind of thing. There was, how do I deploy in these areas? And then we had about 12 use cases that we gave them, accessing data from another agency, in a zero trust environment, a user from a BYOD accessing data at the data center or in the cloud. We had 12 use cases, general use cases we gave them, and so they gave an outline. So they're supposed to follow the presentations, supposed to follow this outline. So it's an apples to apples. So those are all recorded. ATARC actually publishes them on their YouTube site. They can all be watched from there at atarc.org or on their YouTube site if you subscribe. And as well for the lab, we just started. So we've been flowing with the vendor presentations every Friday. So we just reinvigorated, and we're bringing back the government folks together. We just kicked that off again today. And then we're going to start meeting, and we're going to start talking about, all right, what are the requirements for an integration look like? What do we want to talk about M2209, which is kind of, that's been thrown at us, and those have specific requirements. How we want to deliver that, and what do we want to get from our vendors for that? So definitely, if you're interested, you can reach out to me directly, and I can get you in touch with the right folks that can facilitate at ATARC. And participate at whatever level that you want. There's other working groups besides Zero Trust as well that may be beneficial. There's cloud, there's quantum computing. Some of them, are white papers, but ours is actionable. We want to actually build something and actually show it, and proof is in the pudding when you see it, right? Not just slide presentations of what if kind of thing. We actually want you to come in and build and show us. So it's very actionable.
Cool, very cool. Now, I think you have touched on it, but the question is, how have agencies begun to start collaborating towards zero trust?
A lot of ways.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, ATARC's one, IACT is another. I know AFCEA, I think the Northern Virginia chapter, Glenn Hernandez is chairing kind of a discussion around that, and they're developing white papers. I belong to the CIO's Innovation Council Working Group on Zero Trust. GSA is doing a great thing right now. They are actually developing what is called the Zero Trust Playbook. And we have a lot of folks contributing to that. Kind of like, all right, what's the least viable product kind of concept in the first phase of Zero Trust that we expect agencies to be at? What's the next phase kind of thing? I talked about who are all the players that you need invested in your efforts. And so, it can help with the executives to understand what's needed, can help with, the implementers, the CISOs, primarily kind of somewhat geared towards the small agencies, but I think everybody can make use of it. It's turning out to be a great thing as well. There's cyber stats that are meant for the government to kind of get some more education on it, but there's just a ton of collaboration around this. That's great. A lot of speaking sessions that I've been involved in, of course, like this. There's just a lot of discussion, a lot of collaboration, a lot of people coming together for the same purpose that I haven't really seen for a while, actually. Communications is really good. DHS is a great partner, and doing the maturity model and things like that, participating in a lot of these things. So there's a lot of good participation in a lot of these disparate working groups from the right places, which is helpful.
Excellent, yeah. Excellent. Collaboration and participation reminds me of one of my favorite expressions, in that none of us is as smart as all of us.
Nope, that's right.
Okay, so we do have one more question, and that is, how can we distinguish between good and bad actors?
Everybody is a bad actor. Yeah.
Yeah, trusting no one, right? The art
Yeah,
of
so
trusting no one.
that's where I talk about, and I tell people it depends on what your risk tolerance is. I like to use the example, some agencies before the pandemic, were like, I will never do remote work. I'll never let my administrators work unless they're in the brick and mortar on a, anchor, which I call them anchors, but desktop computer plugged into the wall kind of thing. We we actually learned what our risk tolerances were, and we quickly pivoted to, yeah, we got to be able to support these types of things. So definitely what I'm trying to get at is it depends on what your risk tolerance is, as of how a user authenticates, what type of device they're using, how much telemetry you have, and then how comfortable you are with that, right? How comfortable are you with a PIV card? You're probably going to have less risk tolerance, or probably going to have, that's probably going to be more risk, and you're going to have less tolerance for a username and password. If that's the case, then I'm not saying that they're a bad actor, but you're probably going to be less likely to give them the access that they would normally have otherwise, kind of thing. So but basically, yeah, you're treating everybody as a bad actor almost. But the telemetry and the constant check and the dynamic checking is what's really important. You got to have that integration and all of that telemetry of all those factors coming in, to be able to check so that you can identify when there's a bad actor. And I think that's really where, and I didn't mention this earlier, but I think that's where AI and ML are really going to come in, right? Because you can't rely on humans. We can't wait for humans to see the red blinky light and, oh, I got to do something. Well, let me figure out what it is. Okay. All right. Maybe it's this, maybe it's that. I don't know. What action do I take, kind of thing. Whereas AI and ML, I think, and especially when I talked about baselining, is going to help. What does normal look like? As best we know, what does normal look like? And then, when something, that's not normal. And as you're learning that, all right, in that case, and it's kind of a crawl, walk, run, right? In that case, if I was to apply this action, this would happen. Is that what I want to happen in this kind of event? Okay, yes. All right, let's put that in place and enforce it, kind of thing. So I think you treat everybody as bad until you can get a comfort level, and understand what your risk tolerance is for certain things, understand what normal doesn't look like. And so when abnormal happens, what are the actions that you're going to start taking? So you got to kind of take that crawl, walk, run and understand. But I think baselining is important, but I think AI and ML are really going to be a big factor in helping people do this, because we got to rely on automation. We can't rely on the people so much because they're not going to be reactive enough.
Very good. Well, we have no more questions, but Jerry, I want to thank you for this very warm presentation. Excellent information, certainly a little different from the usual take on Zero Trust, focusing on core principles, business objectives, user experience, and the layered effect. So thank you so much.
And thank you for having me.
It was a pleasure, our pleasure. And so now I'll turn it over to Pat.
Thank you, Donna. And first, I'd like to thank you, Gerald, for such an informative presentation. And, we all must observe, right, good cybersecurity posture and zero trust networking and multi-factor authentication and all of the different areas and flavors of protecting, data and the integrity of, your connections to the internet is so important and so timely. And we observe this every day. And I just want to thank you for being such a staunch supporter of ITPA and for also bringing your subject matter expertise to this virtual luncheon series. Thank you very much. So with that, let me please extend, a warm virtual round of applause. First for Donna for being able to work with Jerry and make sure that he was able to attend, and then also obviously to Jerry for being such, again, a tremendous subject matter expert in educating our community and the industry on zero trust networking. So Again, to our keynote speaker, Mr. Gerald Caron, Chief Information Officer, Assistant Inspector General of Information Technology for the Office of the Inspector General at the Department of Health and Human Services, a virtual round of applause. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Honored to be here.
Thank you. I'd also like to observe once again and thank our sponsors. We greatly appreciate your support. So I always want to, end on thanking your support for the ITPA NCC and hope to continue this great partnership and sponsorship. So to our platinum sponsors, Avaya Government Solutions, Comcast Government Services, Granite Government Solutions, Hughes Government and Defense Solutions, Lumen Technologies and CommScope, a great thank you. To our gold sponsors, BT Federal, Crown Castle, MetTel, SUS Consulting, and Verizon, many thanks. Our silver sponsors, Equinix, GES, Turning Point, Pathway Partners, and Zscaler, and our technology sponsor, Panoptis Intelligence. Again, a special ITPA thank you to you all. And a very special ITPA thank you to all of our longtime friends, partners, and charities. And also just a small, again, special recognition to our newer sponsors, CRT International and AM Fadita Consulting. Thank you all. So we'll go to, again, I spoke earlier about, previewing some of our upcoming events and some of the initiatives that we have for the remainder of the season. So I'll give a quick preview of some of those events that we've scheduled for the rest of the season, and I'd like to highlight many of them. So please mark your calendars. First, I'd like to thank you all for your continued support throughout the pandemic. Of course, it's been difficult to navigate this season due to the Omicron variant, but I'm glad to announce that today we are returning on April 7th in person. The ITPA NCC will look forward to seeing you all again and have a great speaker lined up. DISA's very own Don Means. We will return to the Westwood Country Club for our April 7th event. So please register and join us. The National Capital Chapter Assembly in Baltimore. Again, we want to request your support for this particular event. And as mentioned earlier, our national chapter will join us here on April 24th through the 22nd, through the 24th in the Beltway area, as all of our chapters convene to honor the legacy of our pioneers for the first time in person since the beginning of the pandemic. And another peek into our season for the month of May, we are working with Mr. Bobby Saxon. As a number of the COVID cases continue to decline, we also plan on reconvening again in May as an in-person luncheon, where we have tentatively invited retired Army Colonel and the Deputy CIO for the Office of Information Technology Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, Mr. Bobby Saxon. We look forward to seeing him in May. On June 2nd, we will honor our 2022 Government and Diana Gowan Industry Award recipients at our annual dinner awards banquet. Also, the charity golf tournament. On October 3rd, we hope everyone will join us for our 14th annual charity golf tournament as we look to raise additional funds for our local charities. For more information, visit our website, email us, or join our mailing list and follow us on LinkedIn for all of the latest details. Again, thank you all for continuing to support our local chapter and donating throughout the year. We are pleased to have your support, and we ask that you continue to work with us as we continue to support our local charities. Thanks again, everyone, and we hope to see you again next month. Thank you for joining, and good afternoon.